Okay, so we're going to just move right along ahead with the very dense topic that we are trying to tackle this week. Um, I chose to give you a reading that was analytical and covered a kind of large period. The Lombard reading covers issues that we've been talking about throughout in the course concerning how global modernity the way it came to us through colonial rule, had a huge impact on reshaping our society and culture. Um, and that's why I chose that. I could have given you a very sort of straightforward narrative reading, like an encyclopedia entry, giving you a description of the basics of tasawwuf. But I figured we could do that in class because really all you need is to wrap your head around a few key words, um, and the more important things to understand about the history and role of tasawwuf in the development of Muslim civilization is more important. Okay, now before I jump back in, as a refresher from last time as well as the last couple of weeks, could someone please tell me, let's open participants. Now here you may speculate, you may remember things that I have said, but try to answer this question. Guys, even if you don't raise your hands, I'm really grateful and appreciative of those who do write their responses into the chat. So do that, please. Even if you're like the 15th person to write the same thing. It's a good exercise and it's a good way for me to keep track of who's actually listening and paying attention, okay? So here's my question. Why is it important for us to study tasawwuf in a course on South Asian history? हम ये सब क्यों सीख रहे हैं इस क्लास में? What is the relevance? Anything that you can think of in any random order, and you may speculate. Yes, Mariam.
Can you hear me?
Um, Try again. I can, but halka.
Am I audible now?
Much better. Batao.
Yeah, so I think we are studying this because, for example, we started with Hinduism as well, and then we also touch upon Sikhism, and right now we are studying about Islamic culture and tradition because all of these traditions are very relevant in constructing the foundations of what South Asia today is, and all of these are very relevant in formulating the mindset of the society today we have. So I feel like that this is very relevant to study in order to understand a lot of culture, political, and social factors that influence our society today. Um, and a wider understanding of how things were different back then and right now in tradition is also important to know where we stand and how things have progressed after particularly the British invasion of India.
Thank you, Mariam. Yes. Yes. Josefa.
جی تو میں بھی اسی طرح کا کہنا چاہتا ہوں یہ کہ تصوف ہو گیا یا اس طرح کی جو چیزیں یہ ہماری سوشل ہسٹری کا حصہ ہیں. ٹھیک ہے, اس طرح کے مطلب کنگز ہوتے ہیں, بادشاہ ہوتے ہیں, وہ پولیٹیکل ہسٹری کا حصہ ہوتے ہیں. تو اگر کسی معاشرہ کو جاننا ہے, ٹھیک ہے, لوگ کس طرح رہتے ہیں, ان کے آئیڈیاز کیا ہیں, ٹھیک ہے, وہ کس طرح سے سوچتے ہیں, وہ کیا کیا چیزیں کرنا چاہتے ہیں اپنی زندگی میں, یا پھر تو اس کی ڈیولپمنٹ ہوتی ہے. ٹھیک ہے, مثال کے طور پر ہمارے یہاں پر ایک خیر مطلب اوپری سطح کی چیز صحیح, لیکن یہ ہے کہ ایک قسم کا عام لوگوں میں ایک رواج پایا جاتا ہے صوفیوں کی عزت و تکریم کا. ٹھیک ہے, اور کچھ دوسرے مطلب گروپس بھی ہیں جو اس کے مخالف ہیں. ٹھیک ہے, تو یہ ساری چیزیں کس طرح سے آئیں, ٹھیک ہے, اور آج کے معاشرے میں کس طرح سے کام کرنی ہے، تو میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ اس کے لیے یہ ہسٹری پڑھنا یہ لازمی ہے.
آپ نے بہت اچھا نقطہ اٹھایا حذیفہ. کچھ اندازہ ہے آپ کو کہ ہمارے زمانے میں لوگ تصوف کے خلاف کیوں ہیں، جو ہیں خلاف؟
جس طرح آپ نے کہا ہے کہ مطلب برٹش جو مطلب کلونیلزم ہے، تو جب وہ ہسٹری لکھتے ہیں یا ریلیجن کے اوپر بات کرتے ہیں، ٹھیک ہے، تو ان کے وہاں پر ریلیجن جو ہے وہ اس طرح کا نہیں ہے، ٹھیک ہے، کہ جیسا کہ مارٹن لوتھر کنگ کے بعد جو ہے نا یہ ایک بہت پرسنل ہو گیا تھا، ٹھیک ہے، معاملہ. اور اس طرح کا مطلب وہ نہیں سمجھتے کہ اس طرح کوئی چیز ہو سکتی ہے کہ جیسے مطلب کوئی ایک خاص بندہ اور وہ مطلب خدا کے ساتھ اٹیچ ہو، جیسے یہاں پر ہوتا ہے کہ صوفی مرید اور پیر وغیرہ مرید جو ہیں پیروں کو سمجھتے ہیں، تو وہ اس چیز کے خلاف تھے، ٹھیک ہے، تو انہوں نے اس کے خلاف بہت زیادہ لکھا. پھر یہ ہے کہ جو دوسرے لوگ ہوتے ہیں مطلب جو جدت پسند ہوتے ہیں، ٹھیک ہے، جب انہوں نے دیکھا کہ مطلب ویسٹ زیادہ اچھا مطلب ترقی کر رہا ہے وہ، تو انہوں نے یہ چیزیں ان سے اڈاپٹ کی، ٹھیک ہے، کہ ہمارے معاشرے میں یہ مسائل ہیں، شاید یہ اس کی ایک وجہ ہے، ٹھیک ہے. تو یہ ایک مطلب ایک قسم کی کنسٹرکشن ہوئی ہے ہمارے یہاں پر جو ان کے خلاف ہے.
صحیح. رمین؟
Yeah, so like Huzaifa said, in the South Asian context particularly, a huge part of our like perceived national identities these days is built upon religion, may it be in Pakistan or India or any other parts of the subcontinent. And there's the way religion is perceived like went through a huge change or when colonialism, like because of the prevalence of colonialism. And I think it's important for us to know what it was like before it went through this distortion and this sort of change in the way it's perceived, because the way it was formulated originally in a more, I say, purer form, because now it is like the reading mentioned, it went through like an intellectual sort of degeneration, right, because of colonialism. So I think it's important for us to know how it was before colonialism affected it, so that we can uh, contextualize it in terms of history and where we're lacking right now.
صحیح. صدف؟
Yeah, I think Ramin covered mostly what I had to say, but it was the same point that for us right now, it helps in the agenda setting or even during partition and everything. It helped with the agenda that if our concept of religion was a lot more hardened and on both sides, if we weren't as tolerant of each other, so it helped those in power, um, like it helped them use religion politically that way.
All right. Kanwal?
Miss, the question that you stated about why people generally do not agree with tasawwuf nowadays. So I think that has to do with how religion in general progressed, especially in our part of South Asia. So if you look at religion currently, it's more about a set of things that you have to do, a set of practices, and those very strict boundaries that you have to follow as a Muslim or as a person following religion, and it's less about the things that you generally believe in. So I think in understanding where, like Ramin said, where it sort of diverged into this difference, especially if you look at, for example, partition, right? So pre-partition, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, all of them lived in harmony. But right after partition, there was this very strict level of separation. So I think that is why tasawwuf is important.
Okay. Fatma? Fatma?
Assalamualaikum. Yes, am I audible?
Ji, ji.
Okay. So I think we are studying this because it kind of gives us an overview of the tasawwuf developed throughout the years and how it came to like South Asia and how it manifested itself in Sufi orders and like its impact on South Asians, like while they were experiencing colonialism, which was an external force, but there was also this internal force like the modernistic reform movement, if I'm not wrong.
Many.
Yeah, which was like negated, and how the true essence of Islam was tahqiq and haq, and it was lost while we came more towards practical implications like namaz, fasting, instead of internal like love towards God. So yes.
Thank you, Fatma. Yeah, that's actually a good note to take the conversation forward. A useful way of understanding what happened is that external और internal में एक rupture हो गया, जिसको ट्रेडिशनल इस्लामिक लैंग्वेजेस में जाहिर और बातिन कहते हैं, राइट? तो जाहिर और बातिन तो पहले एक ऑर्गेनिक चीज़ थे ना, लाइक द पार्ट्स ऑफ द एलिफेंट, बट आफ्टर the intellectual intervention of modern ways of thinking, वो बिल्कुल एक दूसरे से disconnect हो गए. हाँ, of course we all kind of pay lip service to the idea that of course you must have faith from your heart, of course your inner thoughts should be pure, and your motivations should be pure, but somehow, at least in our socialization, not much emphasis is placed on that, nor is there any training or education that goes along with, to bolster that purpose or value. Who teaches you how to purify your soul? It's not an area of human education or training the way that it used to be. Okay. Let's try to think of a few of them, like just a few handful of the absolutely, most important takeaways. What is it, if we were to answer this question in an exam, right? What are the things we list in our first paragraph? Ek to, let's look at your chat. Guys, if at any point you see blank squares on the shared screen hiding my slides, let me know, because sometimes that happens on this desktop. Let's look at this. It is important to study all these traditions side by side because they allow us to understand that there are more similarities amongst traditions than was previously taught to us. In this way, it is important. Okay, let me take one point from there. In the modern world, we place emphasis on defining and embracing difference of all kinds. I'm brown, I'm not black. I'm Pakistani, I'm not Indian. I'm Muslim, I'm not Christian. I'm Shia, I'm not Sunni. And this is how we define most things, not just our own identities and not just in the realm of religion. It's just the way things are. It's the way we organize the world. That is a great difference from pre-modern times. What you get in pre-modern Islamic South Asian culture, it's not that people are not aware of differences. People are very much aware of differences. But those differences are not treated like boxes with walls that cannot be crossed or jumped. They are treated as, it's better to think of it as a rainbow of colors where one color melts into the other and the whole rainbow is still one organic whole, a spectrum with diversity in it. I have another comment. What Fatma just said is relevant nowadays because people think that saying namaz 5 times a day gives them license to comment on other people's spirituality who may not be religious in the conventional sense. You know what? You can start now saying who may not be religious in the modern sense, because this is modern convention. Shah Abdul Latif actually commented on this in one of his poems, where he basically said that it is easy to pray and keep a fast, but it is much harder to actually be a good person. Shah Abdul Latif Bhitai kaun hai? Again, one of the greatest Sufi poets of this region and perhaps of all Islamic history. And these are themes that are repeated again and again and again in the poetry of great Sufi masters. These themes of the internal being more important than the external. अच्छा, ये भी ज़रूरी है याद रखना कि बहुत कम ऐसे सूफी तरीक़े हैं जो कहते हैं कि एक्सटर्नल रिचुअल्स को बिल्कुल छोड़ दो. It's a kind of image we have that somehow, because all the focus is on the internal, everything else is free for all and laissez-faire. That was not the case. सब नमाज पढ़ते थे, सब रोजे रखते थे, मगर वो तो एक आम सी चीज़ थी, दांत मांजने की तरह हमारे लिए. Not a big deal, not to be considered something for which I should pat myself on the back. It's what came after that mattered, the internal development. Yes, of course, there are branches of Sufi philosophy, such as that of the Qalandars, of whom one of the greatest is our own Sindhi Lal Shehbaz Qalandar, and the Qalandars who still hang around near his shrine in Sevan, where their philosophy actually shuns or looks down upon these simple external acts of piety because they are considered hypocritical and arrogant. Sarin, your hand is raised.
Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Go on.
Yeah, so I'm just confirming, this is the thing you taught us in the last class about the three circles, or the talim being namaz, and these people having the tazkiyah, the purification of the soul, right? Okay, thank you.
आइडियल लेकिन ये था कि तीनों चीजें हर एक इंसान में साथ साथ होनी चाहिए. You see, कोई डिवीजन ऑफ लेबर और स्पेशलाइजेशन नहीं थी. हर एक इंसान की तालीम, तरबियत, तज़कियत, तीनों चीजें जरूरी हैं. Okay, I want to dive now, get away from the larger philosophy for a bit and dive into what are the defining features of what we call institutionalized tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is also known as the path or the path of love, and the love philosophy we will explore at length. But what do you do while you're on the path? One of the most important things is, of course, that you can do nothing unless you have a master to whom you completely submit and dedicate yourself. Now, that act of submission to your Sufi sheikh is a dress rehearsal of the act of Islam itself. For all intents and purposes, your training under your Sufi sheikh, all of it is practice and rehearsal for the way that you actually want to be with God himself, who is the ultimate goal. The sheikh or the pir is somebody higher along the spiritual path who becomes your guide, without whom you cannot proceed. And why not? Why do you need a guide? Because you need somebody to look into your heart and to sort of bond with you on an internal level so that he or she can teach you by making you feel the things that you need to feel. which is very different from the way I'm teaching you, which is through words. I'm telling you stuff. And this is how all, knowledge transmission or transfer of information happens now. But this is not a situation where transfer of information is happening. This is a situation where one higher soul is actually exerting spiritual energy to reshape another soul. So because the teachings go from master to disciple, who becomes a master, then has a disciple, and so on, it becomes a chain. And that chain is silsila. There are many, and have been many, important Sufi silsilas through Islamic history across the Muslim world. Some died out, some remain alive and well. One of the most important silsilas in South Asia, which has many, many, many centers, because the khalifas of different Chishti sheikhs would spread out into new areas, is the Chishtiya. And they came quite early. This is one of the silsilas that began with somebody running away to India from the Mongol invasions, or the early Mongol invasions. And that was Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, whose dargah today is in India, in Rajasthan, and known as Ajmer Sharif. Muinuddin Chishti के 3 बहुत मशहूर मुरीद और खलीफा हैं. Anybody know who they are, by the way? They're very famous. No? Does anybody know the name of any famous Chishti Sufi Sheikh? Ittifaq se shayad. Ji Fardan.
I don't know. I was just guessing.
Go ahead, guess.
No, I can't.
Okay.
चिश्ती मुजाहिद.
Good one. नाम उनका वहीं से आया होगा ना? Because these guys have been here for a millennia.
Probably.
So there's, it's a big clan. Achha, we have something in the chat. Let's see. Someone named Qutubuddin. Yes, that is true. And in fact, he's the least famous. Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki. The 3 people who followed Muinuddin Chishti as leaders of the order, उनमें से जो 2 बहुत ही मशहूर और बहुत ही ज़्यादा सक्सेसफुल थे, सक्सेसफुल इन द सेंस दैट उन्होंने बहुत लोगों को मुतासिर किया, जो वाकई बैत दे के मुरीद बने और जो मानने वाले बने सिर्फ, राइट? एंड अ लॉट ऑफ South Asian communities attribute their conversion to Islam to these big Sufi saints. So the 2 famous ones, one is in Delhi, and that is Nizamuddin Aulia. Nizamuddin Aulia is been immortalized because one of his most dedicated murids was the great poet Amir Khusro. The other one is on our side of the border, Baba Farid Ganj Shakar in southern Punjab at Pak Patan. सलीम चिश्ती बहुत बाद में आए, और सलीम चिश्ती इसलिए मशहूर हैं because Salim Chishti was a living Chishti Sufi who was a contemporary of the Mughal Emperor Akbar. और अकबर उनको बहुत मानते थे, और अकबर उनके पास गए थे दुआ करने for a son, right? That's the story. And through Sheikh Salim Chishti's prayers, Akbar was granted his first son, who he named Salim for the Sheikh. All right. So now we have to start thinking a little bit about this idiom and language of love. The reason it's important is that जो भी आसार रह गए हैं ना, जो भी थोड़ी बहुत ट्रेस रह गई है इस कल्चर और वैल्यू सिस्टम की हमारे माशरे में, मॉडर्निटी में, it has remained alive through the metaphors and references and symbolism of love language in Urdu poetry. Not just high Urdu poetry, but like pop songs, Bollywood songs, everything. It lives in the language. And it is the clearest path back to understanding where it's all coming from. Now we think of it, it's really been debased to a very basic sort of level of meaning, but the words remain and the metaphors remain. If we learn where they came from, we will be able to dive into the deeper mystic philosophies that generated this language. So we began with a harder concept, which was that of ihsan, and how the word ihsan comes from the word husn, which we know well, which is beauty. Magar beauty ka matlab kya hai? Husn ka matlab kya hai? Not something that's merely pleasing to the eye. वो तो बस ज़ाहिरी हुस्न होता है ना. Something that anything, anything that is imbued with all kinds of beauty, outer and inner beauty, and inspires within the onlooker or the listener an attraction, a sense of love and desire and wanting. And these fundamental human feelings of desiring that which is beautiful, these were elevated in the language of pre-modern Islam. It's what Muslims and Muslim thinkers believed made the human being higher and brought him higher. The ultimate beauty, of course, belongs to God because He is Jamal. And therefore, the ultimate beloved or object of love for a human soul is God, because there's nothing more beautiful, nothing more magnetic and attractive and pulling on your heartstrings than the beauty of God. So the human heart is designed and made to love beauty in all its forms, leading eventually to love of the ultimate source of all beauty, God Himself. The human instinct to yearn for, to desire, to have a taste for true beauty, for true love, that is called by these terms that you know, Zawq, Shauq, Ishtiyaq. And the love itself, usually you've got as Ishq, Mohabbat. And then there are a cast of characters that go, in this discourse as though it's a narrative. There's love itself, Hub, Mohabbat, Ishq. There is the object of love. See, without an object of love, there can't be love. Something has to inspire love. So that is the mehboob or the mashook, the one who is loved, the beloved. And then there is the lover, which is every human soul on their journey, who is the ashiq. As you might be thinking, the concepts of love and beauty, of course, are very general and very wide, and indeed they were meant to be. So we just want to try to understand the basics of what this universe of love language signified. And what we need to try and remember is that this poetic love language, talking about spirituality and God, was not a marginal thing. It was not understood and used only amongst certain circles or certain classes. It was universal. It was understood across classes. That's the thing to remember. Tasawwuf had this ability to communicate its philosophies to a very, very wide audience. And that's why simple poetry and music was so important as tools of communication for them. Remember the Chakkinama that we looked at? Okay, does anybody know the difference? Have you ever heard this word marifat or irfan? Yes, okay. Ayaz or Ruqayya, can you tell us what it means? Or what you think it means? Likha bhi hai. I can't hear you. Is it related to Maruf, famous? No, I'm afraid not. Wisdom, okay. What kind of wisdom? Spiritual wisdom? Oh, thank you, Sarah. That's lovely. Knowing all about anything, especially God. Thanks, Ishan. अच्छा देखो, इल्म जो है, आप इस लफ्ज़ के मायने आप जानते हो, उर्दू में भी है. इल्म is the root word for talim. So ilm is knowledge of the outer world, knowledge of the material world from the rational mind and the senses. That is ilm. Marifat or irfan, same thing, is knowledge through inner emotional and spiritual experience, right? It's about having an experience of feeling raised to a higher level and being exposed a little bit to God's beauty. Not through your senses, not through your rational mind, but as a somatic experience in your body and in your heart. So the organ that is associated with marifat is the heart or the qalb. And please remember again and again that in Islamic discourse, the heart is the soul. It is the seat of the human being. They're used interchangeably. And the binary or the difference is between the aql or the rational mind and the qalb or the heart. Marifa in Urdu, absolutely. Do you all understand? You probably know, but may not have thought about it. आप लोग सबने ज़्यादातर कुरान के लिए उर्दू का अरबी का कायदा पढ़ा होगा. आप लोगों में से बहुत से लोग foreign language भी Arabic लेते हैं यहाँ. Lot of words, including my name and many of your names, that in Urdu and Farsi हम उसको खुला छोड़ देते हैं आलिया. That hey, that goal hey in Arabic is actually a ta marbuta, right? So depending on what's coming after, sometimes it is left as a, and sometimes the ta is pronounced. बस वो तरीक़ा, तरीक़त, मारिफत, मारिफा वो एक ही चीज़ है जब हम उर्दू में बात करते हैं. हकीकत, हकीका, yeah, that's it. Has anybody heard of this very famous person? Okay, lots of yeses. One of the brave souls who have said yes. Could you tell us what you know about her? Anything? Not in the chat. Rehma, ji.
So I don't have like complete detail, like I can't remember the full detail, but from what I read and what I've heard is she was this woman who essentially dedicated her entire life to just Allah and her love for him. And that's what she preached. It was not preached, but like her concept was that the more that you should love God for the sake of loving him and not because like he's going to grant you something or anything, but because he deserves to be loved in his entirety because he is so merciful, he is so giving. And so she like traveled and all she had with her was like just I think it was like this rock and like this thing that she used, something that she used for a blanket, I can't remember. And that's how she traveled. Like she ate what she could get and everything. And she just was entirely devoted to him. And she had like a lot of miracles in a sense that would happen to her because of that faith that she had in God, that he would provide for her. Like, because people would be like, like get married or something. She never got married. And that was just her entire life.
Okay, so guys, now I have a question from the point of view of historical method, and you guys as students of history. How do you think we know anything about figures like Rabia, or if you start reading this slide, her contemporaries who are also considered the founding fathers of Tasawwuf, Hassan al-Basri and Junaid? And look at those dates. They are basically 8th century, all of them. It's very, very early. How do you think we know anything about them? Poems, oral tradition, people write about Sufis. Yeah, all of that is correct. Huzaifa, बताइए.
जिस तरह ये मतलब जो पीर वगैरह होते हैं या सूफ़ी शयूख होते हैं, इनकी मलफूज़ात को महफूज किया जाता है, जो इनकी मतलब बातें होती हैं, तो उसके ज़रिए से भी ये जो है ना चीज़ों का
बिल्कुल. So here is an interesting thing for you to think about as postmodern historians. We don't really know and can't quite tell whether these people actually existed, whether they lived the way they are supposed to have lived, in the places they are supposed to have lived, at the time they are supposed to have lived. We don't even have any kind of clarity or confirmation as to whether the sayings and poetry attributed to them was actually written by them or not. But none of this matters. Can anybody tell me why it doesn't matter? Why a lack of factual certainty doesn't matter in this case? Because it's all part of the same tradition, because the purpose is to teach about the teachings. Exactly. So the figures, right? The figures who have remained alive and well and revered in the textual tradition of the Sufis, those figures are incredibly important. And it doesn't matter how factual they are. जो राबिया टेक्स्ट में से निकलती है, राइट, जिस राबिया ने मतलब सदियों तक सूफियों को मुतासिर किया, वो राबिया सिर्फ अपनी मलफूजात और अपनी शायरी में रहती है. It doesn't matter what she may have actually been like. Sadaf, your hand is raised.
Yes, I just wanted to add on to a very interesting, I mean, these aren't exactly stories, but I guess traditions which are passed on. And like you mentioned, it's not they're not supposed to, you know, have that sort of historical accuracy. They're just there for that purpose. So one of the incidents I've heard about her is that she was walking and she had fire in one hand and she had water in the other, and people asked her.
That's the paint.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm
Yeah.
coming to that story.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Sadaf. So there are many things, you know, and do look her up. She's a very interesting character, and her relationship with Hassan al-Basri is very interesting also. It's kind of one of the few times in history that you get a relationship like this. She's a woman, he's a man. They are not related. They are not married. They are best friends. Not only are they best friends, they are colleagues on the path of tasawwuf, which they haven't named yet, they haven't figured it out yet. They're actually figuring it out by doing it and experiencing it and experimenting. And among the many things that the oral tradition has recorded for us about Rabia are these stories where she's in conversation with Hassan. And in all those interactions and conversations, she is, you know, even though she's his friend, right? And there is a collegial, they're colleagues, there's a relationship between them. She's also usually his teacher, in that in every little debate or interaction that they have, all the stories, she teaches him something. And I'll share one of those with you. But first, the story that Sadaf was alluding to, which is depicted here in this much, much later painting. It kind of defines why Rabia is important. It is also the story which becomes the foundational story of all Sufi philosophy. One day, Rabia, who's a well-known faqir figure, right? She lives in poverty, she sleeps with her head on a stone, she begs for food, she shuns society. Apparently, she was a freed slave, right? So she had no immediate family, she had nowhere to go, and she spent her life in devotions. And was a well-known figure in Basra as a holy figure. So the story goes that one day she's running through the streets of Basra with a pitcher or vessel of water in one hand and a wooden torch of fire in the other hand. And people stop and ask her, you know, Ya Rabia, where are you going with those things? What are you going to do? And Rabia stops to instruct all of them. And she says, I am going to burn the gardens of paradise and put out the fires of hell so that people no longer worship God out of greed of reward or fear of punishment. What is the lesson in this story? So that people no longer worship God out of greed of reward, that is the gardens of paradise, I'm going to burn them, or fear of punishment, that's the fires of hell, so I'm going to put them out. But only out of love. There should be no other motivation. Ji Jyoti.
Yes, miss. So I just have a question that if someone, I know that people love God because they want to get rewarded and they want to go to paradise, or they don't want to go to hell.
That's the contradiction in terms. People go through the motions of ritual and what they consider religious law so that they end up in heaven and don't go to hell. Love is a whole other ballgame.
So, what would be the obviously, if we're humans and we're very selfish and we always think about our self-interest. So then what will be the actual motivation? Isn't it that, we're motivated and we're like selfishly motivated to do all those religious commandments just to go to paradise?
She's acknowledging that. And what she's what the teaching in this story is to shame people, to make them become self-aware that all the good things that they think they're doing them for selfish reasons and motivated by very base motivations. Greed and fear, they are very human emotions, but they are base, lowly, bad human emotions. And she's saying, those are not the motivations with which you should seek the most glorious beloved. You need to open your heart up and just be in love with him. Pazirish, since you have raised your hand the first time, then Huzaifa.
Miss, building, can you hear me? Okay, building on to what Jyoti said, isn't one of the themes of Islam that we're supposed to be afraid of God? Like, you know how people say Khuda se daro? So wo dar is like it. That is what makes us self-aware and prevents us from committing sins.
अब सोचो ना, तुम्हें कहा गया है ना कि खुदा से डरो. कब रह, किस सदी में रहती हो तुम?
21st.
तो क्यों कहा जाता है खुदा से डरो?
क्योंकि बहुत गुनाह कर सकते हैं हम.
क्योंकि आप मॉडर्न ईरा की पैदावार है ना, जब सारा दीन ज़ाहिरी बन चुका है.
जी बिल्कुल. Okay, that makes sense.
हुज़ैफा?
अच्छा, तो ये मेरा अपना पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस है. मैं मतलब तकरीर सुन रहा था, उसमें यही है कि ये वाक़या जो है राबिया बसरी साहिबा का रहमतुल्लाह अलैह, इनका आया तो वो कह रहे थे कि तसव्वुफ़ के मतलब ये होते हैं ना, स्टेजेस होते हैं, ठीक है, कि बंदा किस तरह का होता है. तो कहते हैं कि एक हम जैसे लोग होते हैं, ठीक है, जो चाहते हैं कि जन्नत और जहन्नम में ऐसी मतलब डरें और मतलब जन्नत की लालच करते हैं, ठीक है, और एक होते हैं जो राबिया बसरी के मकाम पर होते हैं, जो इन दोनों चीज़ों का वो नेगेशन करते हैं. वो कहते हैं कि नहीं, अल्लाह ताला को मतलब सिर्फ अल्लाह की इस वजह से बात करनी चाहिए क्योंकि उसके साथ मोहब्बत करनी चाहिए. वो कहते हैं कि एक जो सूफ़ी जो होते हैं उनका एक और दर्जा होता है, ठीक है, और फिर वो एक बताते हैं कि हुज़ूर सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने भी दुआ की है कि भाई मुझे जन्नत में जाना चाहिए, ठीक है, वो दुआ की अल्लाह ताला से और ये कहा है कि मैं जहन्नम से मतलब पनाह मांगी है. तो वो इसको समझाते हैं. वो कहते हैं कि वो इस वजह से नहीं कि मतलब खुद गर्जी या मतलब एक कोई लालच है जन्नत में जाने की, बल्कि इस वजह से क्योंकि कुरान मजीद में अल्लाह ताला खुद कहता है कि भाई नेक लोग जो हैं उनके लिए जन्नत मैंने बनाई है और जो बुरे लोग हैं उनके लिए मैंने जहन्नम बनाई है. तो इट इज़ नॉट टू प्लीज़ आवर सेल्व्स, मतलब एक किस्म की है ना, बल्कि वो जो अल्लाह ताला चाह रहे हैं हम उसी को ही चाह रहे हैं. मतलब जो हमारी विल है, ठीक है, वो अल्लाह ताला की जो मर्ज़ी है उसके साथ एक हो जाए. तो तसव्वुफ़ का आखिर मकाम यही है.
बिल्कुल, और ये ज़रूरी बात हुज़ैफा ने हमें याद दिलाई. On the path of tariqa, there is very much a sense of stages, maqamat hote hain. And in many Sufi orders, they have specific names, they have specific markers. If you have felt this and done this, then you have reached base 1, base 2, base 3. And absolutely, for someone like Rabia, who is considered to be a soul who reached the highest maqam or base, emulating her without following her path first is an irresponsible and arrogant thing to do. Nevertheless, many of her teachings, and actually also picking up from what Huzaifa was saying, again, in the modern world, she's a figure who makes people uncomfortable. It's really hard to get her to fit into the kind of religious morality that Muslim communities of different kinds now wish to, enforce and follow. But she is so central to the tradition of tasawwuf that the millions of people who still very much believe in it can't get rid of her. They cannot carve her out and chuck her from the tradition. They're stuck with her. So there's a lot of justification and conditions attached to this is what she meant and this is what she's about, and not all of it is wrong, but some of it at least is coming from an inability to embrace her fully. Both her teachings are uncomfortable, and the very fact that she is a female character is uncomfortable. But she's there. Yes, Sadaf.
I just had another point which I would like to share with you and also my peers. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a very famous character in Sindhi literature, Vatayo Fakir. And he also had a similar story about this, that when he was, he's a character in, again, it's like oral traditions, but basically when he was a child, his mother told him to go get a piece of coal from hell. And he went to hell, and when he went over there, so there was nothing there. And then he told his mother that there is actually no fire or anything in hell. Everyone comes and brings that fire and hatred with them. So I thought it was very interesting.
That's a famous story. Thank you for sharing it. I mean, these are meditations on the questions you're all raising, What does it mean for God to be angry with you or disappointed, to judge you, to deem that you belong in hell? What is hell? What is sin? What is it to fear God? None of these are straightforward concepts. So this is another really important distinction between pre-modern Islamic cultures and modern Islamic cultures. In pre-modern Islamic cultures, everybody understood that interpretation was a complex and difficult thing. Today, in our very scientistic modern world, very influenced by British Protestant Christianity, we are taught to believe that it's all very straightforward. It's right there in black and white in the book of God. Just read it. God says he's going to be angry with you and he's going to put you in hell. What's there to think about? Right? So we've become very literal. And what happens when you become literal? You flatten the possibilities of meaning in everything. Literalism and understanding things literally, that is one of the major values of modernity, and one that did not exist before modernity. Yes, Momina? Hamna? Two people are speaking.
Assalamu alaikum. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a very interesting version or a very interesting perspective to this that I would like to share because it's coming to my mind.
Sure.
So it's that, in philosophy, we read that there are degrees of self-interest. There's narrow self-interest and there is wide self-interest. So while it makes perfect sense that, you shouldn't do good deeds out of your fear of death or hell or things like that. But some people also argue that as long as you have God in the equation, there is still a relatively higher degree of self-interest compared to not having God at all and doing good for the sake of good only, not even for God, So these are what advocates of atheism put forward, that, although I would like to point out that they still emphasize that self-interest can't entirely be removed. Like, people will have some degree of self-interest no matter what. And some say that true altruism doesn't even exist, perhaps. But even then, it's interesting that they say that if you remove God from the equation, that is when, the highest and the purest form of kindness or virtues come out of. just wanted to point out.
Thanks, Momina. Ayaz?
Am I audible?
थोड़ा सा जोर से बोलो.
आवाज आ रही है?
नहीं, कम आ रही है.
अभी आ रही है? Now?
बोलो.
Then there is an audio clip of at least 40 seconds. Can I play it?
Sorry?
I'm saying that there is an audio clip of at least 50 seconds, some quotes which are right. So can I play it or not?
बेटा Facebook पे डाल दो. All of you are allowed to post, huh? I don't restrict. Okay. So, just to go back to Momina's input, ये again एक काफी modern Western concept है altruism का, right? It's this concept that sometimes human beings do good things for other people without any self-interest, right? So some selfless giving or kindness. That's not really the discourse of tasawwuf. The discourse of tasawwuf is, Rabia might tell you if she were here, you should do lots of good things. You should spend your life doing good things. You should not harm others. You should help others. You should be respectful of nature and the ecology and so on and so forth. But none of that should be done to impress God. That's not the point. All of that is done to improve through practice the quality of your heart, right? आप जितनी दफा रोज जिम में जाके वेट्स उठाएंगे और जितना उसको आप वजन बढ़ाते रहेंगे हर हफ्ते उतने ज़्यादा आपके मसल्स डेवलप होंगे. It's the same thing. All of these practices in tasawwuf and on the path of tasawwuf are about building spiritual muscle, right? It's all about making your heart purer, freer, fuller, stronger, more aware, right? Developing your inner faculties of your heart and soul to the point where their eyes open and they can see the whole elephant. So all the good deeds that you do on a daily basis are not themselves important to God. They're part of your training on this path where ultimately, all of it is leading to full inner purification so that you may return to God. It's all about visal. Remember that concept of firaq and visal? The ultimate purpose is to be reunited with your beloved. You are the lover who wants nothing else in life but to be reunited with the beloved. In order to achieve that grand prize, which is very, 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 very difficult, you have to do a whole load of good things. Ji Ayaz.
It's the previous.
Yes, Ayaz, you want to say something? Okay, never mind. Oh, I have missed Malaika's long. Thank you. I'm going to look at that later. Okay. So here's our famous story, which you already know, and here's the other one I promised I would tell you. And there are many stories of Rabia and Hassan having these munazaras. So once Hassan al-Basri saw Rabia sitting by the side of the Euphrates River, it's Iraq, right? So he took his janamaz and he threw it onto the surface of the water. And of course it didn't sink. Why? Because he has such a high spiritual station that he can do miraculous things. And aise tang karne ke liye, he says, come on Rabia, join me. We're going to say 2 rakat namaz on the water. And Rabia looks at him and she says, Hassan, when you are showing off your spiritual goods, she's using the metaphor of trade, you're showing off your spiritual goods in this worldly market. तुम दिखावे के लिए ये काम कर रहे हो, और अगर दिखावे के लिए काम करना है तो फिर कोई ऐसा काम करो जो कोई भी ना कर सके. And then what does she do? She flings her janamaz up into the air. Water is too easy and she flies up on it. And then she taunts him. Come on, Hassan, come up here where everyone can see us. Now, Hassan, who had not attained that station, ठीक है, Hassan का मकाम राबिया के मकाम से कम है, had nothing to say. Then Rabia turns around and says to him, Hassan, what you did, fishes can do. What I did, मच्छर भी कर लेता है. But जो असली काम है ना, the real business is beyond these tricks. And we must stay focused on the real business. So many things are happening in this story. You know, you please reflect on it in your own time. But one of the main things that's happening in it, again, like the story about burning the gardens of paradise, is that never get caught up in the outward or zahiri rituals of worship. The minute you get caught up in them, you've actually lost the plot. You've lost the path. Then it all becomes about showing off. And it becomes about your place in this world. We saw this, right, last time, and maybe some of you can remind us what this two couplets by Rumi are all about. किसी को याद है? कोई हमें याद दिला सकता है? हुज़ैफा.
जी, तो आपने कहा था कि सूफ़ी हज़रात जो हैं, मतलब ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह का जो पहला हिस्सा है, ला इलाहा, उसके ऊपर काफ़ी ज़ोर देते हैं. तो यानी कोई भी चीज़ जिसके साथ, कोई भी वर्ल्डली चीज़ जिसके साथ बंदे की अटैचमेंट हो जाए, वो उनके नज़र में खुदा है. जैसे मिसाल के तौर पर अगर मेरी एक दुकान है, ठीक है, और मैं उसके साथ लगा हुआ हूँ, ठीक है, और अपनी जो रूहानी तरबियत है उसके ऊपर या तज़किया के ऊपर तवज्जो नहीं दे रहा, तो वो मेरे लिए एक छोटा सा खुदा है. ना कि ये कि मतलब एक एक्चुअल मतलब मूर्ति है जिसको मैं पूज रहा हूँ, बल्कि सारी चीज़ें, किसी भी चीज़ के साथ जो मतलब इस रास्ते के अंदर आपका मतलब रोकती है, आपको रुकावट है, वो आपके लिए एक छोटा सा खुदा है. सो ला इलाहा का मतलब यही है कि जो ये सारे छोटे छोटे खुदा हैं ये अलहदा हो जाएँ और इल्लल्लाह, सिवाय अल्लाह के कुछ ना बाकी रहे.
Thank you, Zephyr. So isn't that what Rabia is telling Hassan over here? Right? She is pointing out to Hassan, giving him more self-awareness, right? A lot of this is about self-awareness. कि Hassan, देखो तुम क्या कर रहे हो. You have not internalized the lesson of La Ilaha. You have set yourself up. You like being the local holy man who can do miracles and watch people look at you in awe. And your attachment to wanting to be revered and famous, that attachment is an ilah. It's a god. So this concept, that actually most of the gods that we are meant to destroy live within us. It's not really, it's too easy to say that it's just about idols made of material things. Those are not the dangerous ones. It's so simple to reject them. The dangerous ones are the ones that live in our hearts. And, this concept is actually, it's immortalized in this set of verses by Rumi, but so many Sufi poets have riffed on it. They really, really like to meditate on this concept. As late as the 19th century, Ghalib की भी मशहूर कहानी है. किसी ने उनसे एक दफ़ा पूछा कि मिर्ज़ा क्या आप मुसलमान हैं, आप अपने आप को मुसलमान कहते हैं? और गालिब का जवाब था, आधा मुसलमान हूँ, अभी फ़िलहाल ला इलाह तक पहुँचा हूँ. Now, to our modern ear, that sounds very flippant and blasphemous, right? It almost sounds like he is making a statement of atheism, but he's not. This is what he's saying. He's saying, I don't have the arrogance yet to say that I have truly internalized the Shahada. I'm still working on it, on the harder part of it, which is La Ilah. अच्छा जी, मारिफत और इरफान की बात हुई. This is experiential spiritual knowledge that can only be attained in the heart. But the one who attains marifat is arif, who attains closeness to God, qurbat. And that closeness is a bond of love. So one of the most common terms within the Islamic tradition is not Sufi for people who attain this. It is wali, wali Allah. Or uska plural, awliya, awliya karam. These are words you must have heard. Wali means friend. Wali Allah, friend of God. So those who reach that station, उस मकाम तक जो पहुंच जाते हैं, they have a direct channel of communication and a bond of love with their friend. And therefore, others believe that the Wali Allah, the Awliya Karam, can intercede on behalf of lesser souls. This belief is the reason Sufi sheikhs across the Muslim world, not just India, but all across the Muslim world, this is the reason that major Sufi sheikhs have such large followings. It is also believed, not everywhere, but quite commonly, that attaining marifat and qurbat can inspire small miracles or mujizas in some of the very greatest Sufis, which is what you just saw in that story of Hassan praying on water. This is just terminology, and I will give it to you, that I want to take you through it. All right, a little bit more about this somewhat difficult and complicated relationship. मास्टर, सेंट, अंग्रेजी में हम ये लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल करते हैं, वैसे शेख, पीर, मुर्शिद, ख्वाजा. One of the most well-known pieces of advice in a Sufi manual to a murid is اگر آپ واقعی کسی کو بیعت دے کے ان کے مرید بن رہے ہیں, what you are committing to is this: you should be in the hands of your peer like a dead body in the hands of the washer. What does that mean? What does that mean? Someone tell me. Explain it. Jyoti.
I think it means to submit yourself completely and not have any will of your own or your own desires. Just completely submit yourself, and then it depends on your peer that how does he module you.
That's right. Right? You just no agency at all. Submit and surrender your will. Huzaifa?
تو ایک مطلب یہ بھی ایک استعارہ استعمال کیا جاتا ہے کہ پیر جو ہیں, شیخ جو ہیں, وہ معالج کی طرح ہیں, ٹھیک ہے, وہ ڈاکٹر ہیں اور وہ دل کی جتنی بھی مطلب امراض ہیں ان کو اچھی طریقے سے سمجھتے ہیں, ٹھیک ہے. تو ایک واقعہ ہے, اشفاق احمد صاحب نے لکھا ہے اپنی کتاب میں کہ وہ جب اپنے بابا کے پاس جاتے تھے تو بابا ان کے مطلب کہا کرتے تھے کہ بھئی اس کو سیدھا کریں نا, چپلوں کو سیدھا کریں. تو ایک دن ان کے دل میں خیال آیا کیوں نہ میں بھی اس طرح کا کام کرتا ہوں, اپنے آپ کو جو یہ اکڑ ہے اس کو ختم کرتا ہوں, یہ جو میں ہے اس کے بت کو پاش کرتا ہوں. تو انہوں نے جب سیدھا کرنا شروع کیا تو وہ بابا نے فوراً ان کو بلایا نا, ان کو کہا کہ یہ کام آپ کے لیے نہیں ہے, ٹھیک ہے. تو وہ کہتے ہیں اشفاق احمد کی جب میں نے سوچا کہ اس کے بارے میں, تو بجائے اس کی کہ مجھ میں عاجزی پیدا ہو اور وہ جو میں کا بت ہے وہ پاش ہو, میں مزید اپنی اکڑ میں آ گیا کہ دیکھیں میں کتنا چھوٹا کام کر رہا ہوں, میں اتنا بڑا مصنف ہوں, رائٹر ہوں اور اتنا معمولی کام کر رہا ہوں. تو اصل میں یہ ہوتا ہے کہ پیر جس طرح کہ یہ کہتے ہیں کہ مطلب لائک اے ڈیڈ باڈی, بالکل ٹھیک کہتے ہیں کیونکہ ان کو پتہ ہوتا ہے کہ آپ کے دل میں کیا چل رہا ہے نا, تو ایموشنز ان کو پتہ ہوتی ہیں کیا چل رہا ہے سب کچھ, تو وہ ان کو ہی کرنے دیں, یہ ان کا کام, وہ بہتر طریقے سے جانتے.
Thank you. Got a lot in the chat. Yep, submitting completely. Does anybody know the story of Khizr and Musa?
About the one that getting meat from a what do we say, a holy man, Allah asked him to get.
I can't hear you well for that. It's a famous story. Hamna?
Yes, because there was a time, I guess, Allah asked Hazrat Musa to get I think a part of flesh from a pure person's body, and then he tells him, he runs into Hazrat Khizr Islam,
Yeah, so there's a journey that they go on
who gives
together.
him that which part did he ask him from, and then he tells him that I don't exactly remember, he just asked me to get the flesh. So from each part of his body he gave him a piece of flesh and he asked Allah. I think
No,
I'm
not
not
that
sure
one.
if the details are right.
Hang on
but
for that.
I think this is the case you're talking.
No. The journey in which three things happen. Who knows the story of the journey? I have 4 hands up. Isme se whoever feels confident that they know the story of the journey, keep your hand up. Okay, Tayyaba, I haven't heard from you yet. So why don't you tell us the story?
Okay, so I think حضرت موسیٰ علیہ السلام نے کسی نے ان سے کہا تھا کہ دنیا میں سب سے زیادہ علم رکھنے والا کون ہے. تو حضرت موسیٰ نے کانفیڈنٹلی جواب دے دیا تھا کہ میں ہوں, اور اللہ تعالیٰ کو وہ برا لگا تھا, اور اللہ تعالیٰ نے کہا تھا کہ حضرت خضر کو ان سے زیادہ علم ہے. تو حضرت موسیٰ ایک تلاش میں نکلے کہ ایسا کیا ان کو پتہ ہے جو مجھے نہیں پتہ, حالانکہ میں پروفٹ ہوں. تو ان کے پاس گئے, اور پھر حضرت خضر نے بھی ان سے کہا کہ یو ول ناٹ کویشچن می, یو آر الاؤڈ ٹو کم آن دس جرنی ود می, بٹ یو ول ناٹ کویشچن می. پھر 3 چیزیں ہوئی تھیں جس میں حضرت موسیٰ جو تھے وہ بہت ڈسٹربڈ ہو گئے تھے, اور انہوں نے سوال کیے تھے उसमें से एक मुझे याद है कि हज़रत खिज़र ने किसी बच्चे को मारा था, उसका मर्डर कर दिया था, और बाद में पता चला था कि he killed that boy because वो बड़ा होके अपने माँ बाप का नाफरमान होता और कुछ गलत करता. I'm afraid I don't remember the other two stories.
Anyone quickly remember the other two stories? And it wasn't that benign. It was, so Musa is horrified, right? What is this guy doing? He's murdering a little boy. But later on, he learns that that little boy was going to grow up to be Hitler. Momina, Arsal, whichever one of you would like to jump in and tell us more. Momina?
So I remember the one जिसमें वो ships में holes कर रहे थे.
ठीक है, बताओ.
And उसमें था कि वो एक village था और something जिसमें एक ही ship थी और उस पे बहुत ज़्यादा लोग depend करते थे, उसमें holes थे और उसी पे वो जाके जो village वाले थे वो अपना वो I think जो भी सामान वगैरह होता था खाने पीने का वो लाया करते थे. एंड उस पे जब वो बार बार शिप में होल्स कर देते थे तो हजरत मूसा आस्क्ड हिम के ये उनकी एक ही शिप है, व्हाई आर यू डूइंग दिस. तो इस तरह वो ही वाज अगेन वेरी कंफ्यूज्ड अबाउट इट कि क्या हो रहा है. तो इवेंचुअली हजरत खिज़र अलैहिस्सलाम टोल्ड हिम कि यहाँ पे एक बहुत ही कोई किंग है who is very cruel and all. अगर उसे पता चल जाए कि ये इनकी शिप है तो वो ले जाएगा शिप को, something like that. And so it was something like that कि कि अगर वो किंग जो है उसे शिप का पता चल गया तो वो ले जाएंगे, इसलिए इट्स एक्चुअली फॉर द बेटरमेंट ऑफ द पीपल ऑफ द विलेज के ये शिप में होल्स ही रहे सो दैट दे गेट टू कीप द शिप. आई थिंक दिस वाज द स्टोरी. And there was another one कि एक दीवार थी जो कि उन्होंने गिरा दी थी, ठीक है. एंड अगेन हजरत मूसा अलैहिस्सलाम he was like, मतलब जो भी वो हजरत खिज़र कर रहे थे ना, हजरत मूसा अलैहिस्सलाम just couldn't help but ask कि ये क्यों हो रहा है. तो उन्होंने कहा कि अगेन व्हेन ही आस्क्ड हिम कि दीवार आपने क्यों गिराई है, तो उन्होंने बताया कि इस विलेज में इस घर में जो लोग रहते हैं उनका कोई ट्रेजर है जो या समथिंग ऑफ दैट सॉर्ट, कुछ बिलोंगिंग्स थी प्रेशियस जो कि उस दीवार के नीचे छुप गई थी और वहां पे आई थिंक कोई कुछ किस्म का रेड होने वाला था या समथिंग जिसकी वजह से वो चोरी हो जाता, बट वो वॉल गिर गई थी तो वो बच गया. तो द होल पॉइंट ऑफ द स्टोरी वाज कि जो चीजें ऊपर से सुपरफिशियल लेवल पे रेप्रिहेंसिबल लग रही थी वो असल में उसके पीछे देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ विजडम बिहाइंड एवरीथिंग दैट ही डिड. सो that was the
Thank
story.
you. That summarizes it. Okay, guys, we're totally done with time. It's a very fun story. It's easily available, so look it up and familiarize yourself with the story of Khizr and Musa's journey. I have promised you a short online quiz. You will be getting it. I know many of you are also still finishing up midterms and deadlines. So I'm going to give you a longer period of time and a shorter quiz. So I don't want anybody to panic about it. Most likely we won't be able to open it till Saturday, but then you'll have, at least to the middle of the following week to do it. And yeah, so with that, I think we can wrap it up. If anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand and I will stay and talk to you.
Miss Alia,
Jeevan.
Will the quiz be again true and false?
No, maybe this time I will do multiple choice and fill in the blanks.
Okay.
But उसी तरह के formats होंगे because अब online हम क्या करें, All right. Okay. Take care, everybody. Khuda Hafiz.